So welcome everyone to the February 2019 Equestrian Canada Health and Welfare National Disease and Surveillance Call. We have a pretty big agenda today, so we're going to try to get into it as soon as possible. But just off the hop, if anybody has had a chance or has received the communications about nominating a person for the Equestrian Canada Health and Welfare Committee, or Health and Welfare Award, we are still accepting nominations, and you can do that through the Equestrian Canada website. Our first speaker that we have up today is Megan Bergman from the National Farm Animal Health and Welfare Council.
Thanks to everyone for the opportunity to join the call today. My name is Dr. Megan Bergman. I'm the Executive Director of the National Farm Animal Health and Welfare Council. And Christy had asked us today to come and speak a little bit to some of the activities that would be relevant to the equine community, as well as some of the new initiatives that the Council is undertaking to give you a bit of an update. So thanks again for the time today. Just to give you folks a little bit of a background in terms of what the Council is and kind of what our roles and responsibilities are. We are an organization that is a federal, provincial, and industry-funded not-for-profit. Our key priorities are focused around the One Health initiative. So you can see based on on the PowerPoint, our membership consists of both agriculture and human health representatives so that we can ensure we have a very balanced approach to any of the activities that we undertake. We are currently a bit of a policy-driven organization, and so a lot of our efforts are focused on addressing issues and challenges in the realm of animal health and welfare that are identified by our stakeholders and looking towards opportunities to help to drive policy or regulatory change going forward. The Council itself has several committees that are focused on areas of interest for our stakeholders. Certainly antimicrobial use and resistance is one that's been an ongoing and emerging area of focus for many of the livestock and government folks. And so we spend quite a bit of time working in that area. We also have a committee that focuses on emerging issues, and so that tends to be topic specific as issues evolve, and we try to focus on areas that have been identified as emerging risks or challenges that our stakeholders have raised as concern. We also are focused on spending some time reporting on what we developed, which was the Farm Animal Health and Welfare Strategy, which was really setting some priorities for the livestock and government agriculture community in terms of enhancing animal health and welfare as we move into 2020. And since then, the Plant and Animal Health Strategy has been developed, which the Council has been asked to now take a bit of a lead role on reporting on the animal health component of the Plant and Animal Health Strategy, as well as helping to move some of the initiatives identified within that forward. So we're currently in the process of merging those two activities. We do have a One Welfare working group, and certainly the equine community is, I'm sure, well aware that in many cases when we're dealing with animal welfare issues, there's often an intersecting challenge associated with human mental health. And so we're spending some time working on areas of opportunity to be able to help provide support from a human mental health component in order to see an improvement in animal welfare across the country as well. And then certainly we have an animal welfare working group, and again, we do focus on various areas depending on what's been identified by our stakeholders as areas of importance from year to year. And then we have general business management committees, which are focused on our finances, communications, governance, and just management of the General Council. One of the things that's an asset for the Council is that we do report to the federal, provincial, and territorial regulatory assistant deputy ministers. And so that is a asset from the Council's perspective because it helps us to align some of our activities around the priorities of agricultural ministers in the country, but also to raise issues and provide updates and information to the regulatory ADNs on activities of our livestock stakeholders as well as the work of the Council. So it's a nice cohesive approach to being able to provide updates and be able to get some input from the regulatory standpoint. Our antimicrobial stewardship work lately has been focused on developing a report of the activities of various livestock stakeholders across the country that would be supportive of the Pan-Canadian Action Plan. And so special thanks to Equestrian Canada because they certainly were a player in providing information on this document. It's nearing completion. We're hoping to have it released in the next couple of weeks or so. And a lot of that information shows that there's a fantastic amount of work being done to be able to enhance antimicrobial stewardship in Canada, and helps to identify where there may be some opportunities as well. And so stay tuned for that. Our plan would be that we'd like to have a bit of a webinar to release some of the information and include Aline Dimitri, who's been working on the action plan from the CFIA side, to help provide some additional information to those folks out there who are interested and answer any questions about the action plan as it's evolving. We also have the One Welfare Working Group, so we did a consultation in November with various human and animal health stakeholders on the both health and welfare side to have a bit of a conversation around where there may be opportunity for us to establish a better national framework for supporting mental distress as it pertains to agriculture. And that also includes first responders and veterinarians, as well as animal welfare regulators. We recognize that animal welfare incidents have a major impact not only on the people involved and the animals involved, but also those responders and vets out in the field. So how do we establish a nice national framework where we know there are support systems in place both for affected producers, whether it be from a disease response, or for individuals who are struggling with managing the welfare of their animals due to mental health issues. So we proposed a document based on that consultation that actually went up to the Agricultural Standing Committee, and we're going to be posting that on our webpage shortly for those that may have an interest in terms of what was identified as key priorities for a solid One Welfare framework across the country. Our Emerging Issues Working Group has been focusing on a bit of a tabletop exercise. For those of you who've been involved in disease responses in the past, I think certainly communication is always a bit of a challenge. And so what we wanted to do is develop a bit of a tabletop that could focus on an unknown disease that doesn't have well-described parameters or have well-defined roles and responsibilities, so that we could work through it both with industry and government representatives to kind of smooth the process for communication in the face of an emerging disease event. And so we're hoping to work with the Canadian Animal Health Coalition to identify some funds so that we can roll out that tabletop and see if we can enhance that capacity for communication in an emergency issue. Our animal welfare group has been focusing largely on animal welfare law in the past little while. For those of you who may have had an opportunity to read the article that was developed, there was a lot of research done by David Fraser and two of his graduate students on animal welfare law across the country. And then the council took that document that was developed and looked for opportunities to be able to align animal welfare regulations across the country, both to help with consistency from a regulatory standpoint, but also to help ensure that livestock owners are able to kind of clearly understand what the expectations for them would be with respect to animal welfare standards in the country. We did present that to the FPT regulatory ADM ministers, deputy ministers, and that's also been posted on our webpage for anyone who may have an interest in terms of what was identified. And as I mentioned, we are doing some strategy work with respect to reporting for the Farm Animal Health and Welfare 2020, as well as the Plant Animal Health Strategy. We ran a bit of a pilot project this year where we reached out to several stakeholders, kind of a subset of our members, and asked if they were willing to participate in a bit of a pilot to share information so we could look at an opportunity to develop a nice standardized approach to reporting with respect to some activities supporting animal health and welfare in Canada. And so the pilot was quite successful. If you can see on your screen, the posters that were developed were well received both by the stakeholders that participated, as well as our National Farm Animal Welfare Forum participants who had an opportunity to see these documents. We did focus on animal welfare as well as emergency management and food safety as three key areas, recognizing that asking for updates on 6 or 8 topics is a lot to ask in one sitting for an industry stakeholder. So we will hopefully be expanding our rollout to all of our stakeholders in the near future, as well as looking at expanding kind of the information that we're collecting to continue to broaden the reporting capacity on animal health and welfare in Canada. Those of you who are on the CAS Equine group are probably quite familiar with some of these activities, but the Canadian Animal Health Surveillance System is an organization that really was developed and intended to be an industry and government partnership with respect to establishing networks for surveillance so that we could have more enhanced capacity to share information and prioritize activities with respect to surveillance in Canada. And so CAS has thankfully been supported by CFIA when it started so that we could get everything up and running and be able to undertake some initiatives. But since that time, it's been recognized that it would be really great to see CAS sit within an industry-government partnership. And so Council has been looking to transition CAS from under the CFIA umbrella to under the Council umbrella. So there's been a lot of great work done on those CAS networks, and we're just in the process of developing what that transition plan looks like so we have a good support system in place when it happens. And we've also applied for some funding so we can hire a coordinator and some epidemiology support for some of the activities that we want to undertake. And so I think that's a very exciting initiative, and the Equine Network has been really setting the bar because there's a lot of activity that's been undertaken and a lot of work done on disease reporting, and I'm excited to see what the outcomes of those activities are going forward. The other project that you may have heard a little bit about already is Animal Health Canada. Essentially, Animal Health Canada evolved because there was a recognition from various industry stakeholders that we really are seeing increased disease pressure and impacts from disease in Canada, whether it be PED in the swine industry, cases of bovine tuberculosis popping up, and certainly we continue to see cases of equine infectious anemia in Canada. There's also a recognition that a large-scale disease outbreak such as foot and mouth disease would collapse the red meat industry in Canada, and that although we have tremendous capacity for response, we aren't yet ready or prepared to respond to a very large-scale disease event in Canada. So there's some work that needs to be done. And one of the things that was recognized by industry stakeholders who have been participating in disease responses over time is that there's a real need to see an industry-government partnership, enhanced collaboration and input so that the disease response and regulatory approach becomes less transactional and more of a partnership in how you manage disease in Canada. There's certainly an interest to see more collaborative decision-making when it comes to disease planning and preparedness, as well as response and recovery activities. And an acknowledgement that risk is shared. It's not just government's responsibility, but it's also industry's to make sure that we have both a plan in place for managing risk, but also a current shared responsibility to managing those risks going forward. And one of the things we recognize that's important is we need to get a better grasp of what resources are currently being utilized for animal health emergency response, where we may have gaps in terms of where we need additional resources, but also where we may be able to find some synergies and share resources to be able to be more effective and cohesive in our response approach. So there's lots of great initiatives out there that are supporting various activities across the board with respect to emergency management. Certainly the Council does put a lot of work into animal health and animal welfare. We've got the Livestock Market Interruption Strategy, the Canadian Animal Health Surveillance System, the Canadian Animal Health Lab Network, the National Farm Animal Care Council, traceability, and various activities at the provincial level, both on the industry and government side. And so all of these organizations are doing great work, but how do we make sure that they're pulled together so that we have a very cohesive approach to managing emergencies going forward? And so that's really what the focus of Animal Health Canada will be. What do we think success will look like on that project? Certainly looking towards a bit of a new governance model so that we can see a bit of a partnership approach between industry and government stakeholders with capacity for disease prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. A real partnership on the industry, federal, and provincial government side, as well as collaborative decision-making. So those are kind of what we're aiming to achieve in that process. At this point, we've established both a CEO champion steering committee, which consists of executives from both industry and government, to have a bit of a conversation around how you provide leadership to the working group and the activities that we're trying to do, and help us with some problem solving and decision making as we go forward. Opportunities like today, where we have a chance to speak to various stakeholders out in the livestock and government side of things, to be able to share some of our ideas and ask for any interest or engagement for folks if they have an opportunity to engage in different ways. We'd certainly welcome that. And we're also we have some commitment from stakeholders on the federal, provincial, and industry government side. So we now have a working group that's starting to define what are our tasks and activity going forward so that we can be successful. Our goal is to make sure that we have some recommendations that we can make to our federal, provincial, and territorial agricultural ministers in the summer of 2019. So we're just kind of in that building process to say, what do we want to present to them and what do we need to do to get there? And we do have a face-to-face meeting planned in February to start many of those activities. The other thing we want to do is take a look at other models that are out there. There certainly are a lot of government and industry partnership examples here in Canada, but also internationally. And so taking a look at what lessons have been learned and what other opportunities that we could maybe consider that are out there, that's one of the initiatives that we want to undertake as well. And then have a bit of a model that integrates some of the organizational mandates. So Animal Health Canada is not about creating a new entity. It's a lot about taking a look at what is out there, where can we find some alignment between the various organizations, and how can we manage the governance in a more effective way. So that's really a quick update in terms of what the Council has been up to over the past year. We certainly have a website where you're more than welcome to update and find any of our documents. We do have a blog, so if there's any interesting information that you equestrian folks would like to put out there, we certainly support sharing information and getting some guest blog writers. And you're more than welcome to contact me if you have any questions or would like to discuss any of the initiatives going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. And if anybody would like a copy of Megan's PowerPoint presentation, feel free to email me at khouse@equestrian.ca, and I'll be sure to share that with you. Up next, we have Matt White from the Equine Disease Communication Center. So Matt, if you would like to share your presentation now, and then to unmute yourself, it's *6.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about the Equine Disease Communication Center. I'll give you an update. First, I sent out a report, which was our annual report with December's information. The Equine Disease Communication Center is a communications model. It is supported by the horse industry. The state veterinarians and the departments of agriculture in the U.S. Will have helped to make this work by providing the cases that they get specifically of reportable diseases. It's also an opportunity for veterinarians in the field to support this by submitting cases. And so our goal is to have an immediate real-time alert, particularly of a very infectious disease such as equine herpes, so that the industry can respond, one, with dampening the rumors that can occur with this, and to allow the economy to persist and not be shut down because of rumors and problems. And I think it's achieving that now. We're hoping it also is an educational source where people can get the information they would like about the diseases, about the different options for how to contact state veterinarians, the roles of the different organizations and how they're to respond. The EDC website, which is on the bottom of the sheet that I provided, I encourage you to go and look at that. Bailey McCallum, our communication manager, and the USEF, which has supported this, has worked very hard to make this a friendly, user-friendly document. It also houses a National Equine Health Plan, which was a goal of the USDA, as well as the equine industry and the American Horse Council. So that's a brief summary of what we're trying to do. You can see on the stat sheet that we've had 524 outbreaks or cases in 2018. We think that we don't really know the actual numbers of these cases, although there are statistics that are kept by the states. Our goal is to be able to provide an annual report about how many cases there are and the location of those and so on. Eventually, hopefully, as a source for epidemiological study. Equine herpes is interesting, and it outlines the issues that we have. It's had 60 outbreaks. That's increased. That's doubled in 2 years, and we don't really know if that's an increase in the incidence or if it is, in fact, just more reporting, which is what I think it probably is. Anyway, you can see our results there of the different diseases and the different states. Equine herpes had 2 provinces, Saskatchewan and Ontario, that reported. We're hoping that Canada can provide us all the information they can so that we can report it, and we're doing so with the help of individuals in Canada. The Equine, the website has some new things. One is a news page. If you haven't visited it, go to that under more information. There's Merck Animal Health has a report every month, and we have other news there that we put up. It's not something that we alert people to, but it's available, and people can go to it as they see fit. We've got a number of updates on the website trying to make it more friendly. One of the most important is that we have a new reporting system, a new framework where you can report a disease. Veterinarians, state veterinarians and so on, or individuals from Canada can go in, fill out the form, submit it. It automatically alerts us, and then we take that information and post it on the website as well as Facebook and Twitter. We have established a new database. This is a significant advance. We can put in the information that comes in that then prints out what the alert should look like. The goal of this is to keep records of all these cases and eventually be able to have reports come out to the industry to show what's happening and keep up with what's going on, and as I said, eventually be a source for studies. So you can go and look at that new reporting format, which is in the red line on the home page. Another goal, and we hope to have it done by May, is a phone app so that you can go to your phone and hit the button, and it'll eventually come up with the alerts that are current right now and potentially other sources, educational sources on the website. So we're looking forward to that. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get this information. The thing that we've stressed is the communication. We wanted it to be the primary source for people to get information about ongoing diseases and outbreaks. But it is I think, a good resource for education. And if you go to the disease information page, you'll see that there's fact sheets for owners. We also have links to the American Association of Equine Practitioners guidelines and disease information, as well as some from the USDA. And so anyone can go to this source. You can print out these PDFs, use it to help educate owners. We would like to be the universal source for this. All this information is checked by our committee so that we believe it's very reliable and up to date. The EDCC is funded privately by the equine industry, and that includes owners, it includes organizations, it includes corporations. And it was originally started by funding from the USDA as a startup, but now they've stopped providing that funding, so we are always looking for financial resources and hope that individuals in Canada might feel this is important and be able to donate. You can donate online on the website, and we're hoping that as many people as we can get to support this. We have funding for a couple of years, but we know that that won't last forever, and so we're going to be starting a fundraising system. We hope something that will make it sustainable and automatic. So we'll work on that and let you know how it's going. We're always open to suggestions, and if you have ideas of how we can improve what we're doing, we would really appreciate having that. We consider this a service to the horse industry. It's been something that happened really after my experience at my hospital, where we found communications lacking, and we knew that we needed something better to do. And then the Cutting Horse Show in Ogden, Utah in 2011 kicked this into start mode because it was obvious that we had too much misinformation going around, and that was causing serious problems with the horse industry and the economy. Christy, I think that's a short summary. I'd be happy to try and answer questions.
We'll just hold off questions till the end. If you are okay to stay on the line for about another 15 minutes.
Yep, happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. So up next we have Dr. Kent Fowler. Kent, did you want me to get your presentation up for you, or are you able to share your screen? It's *6 to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you can, let's see, I'll see if I can get this to come up here. Okay, I'm not seeing it on the screen that is coming up here.
Okay, I'm uploading it right now, so if you just want to let me know when to advance your slides, I can do that for you.
Okay, yeah, it says upload in progress. Is anybody else seeing the PowerPoint yet?
No, not yet. It just says converting on my screen, so it's probably about another 10 seconds until it's up.
Okay. Well, while that's coming up, I'd certainly like to thank you for inviting me to present on this call today. I would like to acknowledge up front Dr. Katie Flynn, who is a veterinarian within the Animal Health Branch here in California Department of Food and Ag, and also Dr. Peter Timoney, who I think everybody probably knows from the Gluck Equine Research Center. They were involved in putting a lot of this data together that I'm going to be presenting today, so thanks to them. And the PowerPoint is up, so we will go ahead and get started. What I'd like to do is provide you a little bit of a regulatory perspective on EHV1 and equine herpes myeloencephalopathy as far as what has occurred in the end of 2017 and 2018 in the United States. So just a little bit of background here. On this second slide, you should be seeing equine herpes 1. We, of course, deal with two different strains, and I will be referring as to the wild strain as the non-neuropathogenic through the presentation, and then the mutant strain, or the G2254 genotype, as the neuropathogenic. We, of course, have seen a number of modes of transmission of this virus in the equine community. We have seen a lot of cases with very high viral loads as we have swabbed the nasal passage. Certainly aerosol transmission is a huge mode of transmission here, but many, many ways that we feel this virus can be transmitted, whether it's horse to horse or different fomites, certainly people tracing it from one stall to another, one barn to another, equipment, tack, feed, rodents, birds, common water sources, many, many modes of transmission that I think you are all aware of. This virus is ubiquitous in the environment, and the general feeling and research would indicate that the carrier state probably occurs in about 40 to 60% of adult horses. So it is a virus that is present and unfortunately doing quite well. These horses do tend to have a very short-lived immunity post-infection with this virus. So when we look in specifically, excuse me, I'm on the third slide here now, it's titled Equine Herpes Myeloencephalopathy. We certainly have seen, and Dr. White made mention of this as well in his presentation, certainly an increased frequency over the past 15 to to 20 years. The EHM can certainly be a follow-up after a primary respiratory infection, abortion, or fever related to this virus. The clinical signs depend on a lot of factors, and certainly the severity of CNS lesions that this virus causes. This can lead to neuronal degeneration. There are many clinical signs that we see additionally: ataxia, paresis of the hind limbs, urine retention, incontinence, bladder apnea, penis extension, recumbency, poor tail and anal tone, lethargy, and coma. So many clinical signs associated with this. If we look at this, go on and look at the regulatory disease right now, it's interesting when we look back on the cases that have been identified here in the United States. From 1970 to 2000, there were 19 outbreaks documented in the United States over that 30-year period. If we now jump forward to 2007 and go to 2011, so a 5-year period, we have 43 outbreaks documented in just that 5-year period. And then if we look at the first 9 months of 2018, January 1 to the 4th of October, just over 9 months, we had 52 outbreaks in the United States in 19 different states. And again, as Dr. White mentioned, I think there certainly is an improved recognition of this disease. There's no question that the diagnostics have gotten much improved. I know that, when I look back at my first years in private practice, looking back now, I suspect there were certainly some cases in the 70s and 80s of EHM that I probably missed in private practice. So if we look at it from the reportable disease standpoint, during the 2011 Ogden multi-state outbreak, which was, of course, the cutting horse show there in Utah, at that time, equine herpes myeloencephalopathy was reportable in 36 of the 50 states. Currently, it's reportable in 49 states, and the respiratory, the EHV1 cases, are reportable in 26 states. And this was information that was gathered in 2016 from a survey of the state animal health officials. So I think folks, especially regulatory officials, have certainly appreciated, again, whatever the reason, whether it's truly an emerging disease, whether we're just recognizing it better, that it does have a huge impact on the equine industry. If we look at the incident response, I think the one thing that we can certainly say is that no one size, as far as we develop this response at a stable or wherever this disease crops up, one size does not fit all. We have general response protocols that are followed that evaluate the current disease situation on site to determine site-specific risk factors, to determine the equine population risk factors, to determine feasible, workable on-site response, and to really determine the level of oversight that we want to have as a state animal health official. I think the one thing that we always come up with in our response is if there is one single thing that is more important than anything, it's to get these horses isolated as quickly as possible, even if it's a matter of having to transport them even once the facility is under quarantine, to an off-site location where there are no other horses around. Critical to isolate these horses. So now let's go ahead and look at 2017, 2018, the survey that was done from state animal health officials. Again, this went for 11 months from October 2017 to August 2018. The criteria that we looked at in order to put this data together was that the incident had to have at least one confirmed EHV1 clinical case, and that the state animal health official was involved with that case. We had 17 states that submitted data, and we had a total of 49 incidents in those 17 states. 11 of the states had multiple incidents within their state, and 43 of the 49 incidents had at least one equine herpes myeloencephalopathy case, so at least one case where there were neurological components to the clinical case. 6 of these, for the total of 49, 6 had were only the respiratory cases. If we look at the quarantines that were issued from the state animal health officials, 44 were issued in the 49 incidents. 70% quarantined the entire premises. 25% just quarantined partial premises. We did not have information that was provided for 2 of the premises, and that leaves, if you add the numbers together, 3 premises that did not choose to quarantine in this particular disease situation. When we look at the duration, the average length was right around a month. The shortest quarantine lasted for 14 days, and the longest quarantine for 92 days. If we look at the number of horses that were involved in these incidents, there were over 1,100, almost 1,200 exposed horses in these incidents. And looking at just the gender demographics, for the EHV1 cases, the respiratory cases, 39% of these were mares, 60% were geldings, and there was 1 stallion. Looking at the equine herpes myeloencephalopathy cases, 68% of those were mares, 31% were geldings, and again, 1 stallion. So the denominator in these cases, the 74 and the 80, that is the total number of cases that we had that were identified in this survey, 154. And we will see that coming up on the subsequent slide as well. So 154 confirmed cases. I'm on the slide that is titled Confirmed EHV1 Cases. Of those 154 confirmed cases, there were 74 of those that were the respiratory, and 80, so just over half, that were the equine herpes myeloencephalopathy. And again, when we look at that total number of confirmed cases, 154, 18% of those horses were euthanized or died. And if we look at strictly the equine herpes myeloencephalopathy cases, 35% of those cases were euthanized or were died. If we go on here to the next slide, the EHV1 strain type. Again, there were 49 incidents. 78% of these incidents, 38 out of the 49, involved the non-neuropathogenic, or A strain. 20% involved the mutant neuropathogenic, or G strain. And in 1 incident, they did not report the strain type to us. If we go to the cases, the 154 cases, 58%, 89 out of the 154, involved the non-neuropathogenic A strain, and 41%, 63 out of the 154, involved the mutant neuropathogenic or G strain. If we look at just the EHV1 cases, there were 74 of those. 66% of the respiratory cases were the non-neuropathogenic strain, and 32% were the mutant or neuropathogenic strain. And if we look at the equine herpes myeloencephalopathy cases, half of those, 40 out of 80, were involved with the non-neuropathogenic A strain, and 39, so very close again, basically half, were involved with the neuropathogenic strain. And again, this just shows those numbers in graphic form. And again, if we look at the strain types here relative to those horses that were euthanized, 15% of the 89 horses were euthanized that had the non-neuropathogenic strain, and 22%, 14 out of 63, had the neuropathogenic strain and were euthanized or died. And the strain was not reported for one of the euthanized horses. Interesting to look at the seasonality. Of course, during the time of this survey, February was the big month, which of course is where we are right now. But certainly I don't think this is surprising looking at this graph that we get into the winter, the cold, the wet months, and then early spring is when we typically have been seeing most of these cases of EHV1. So if we look at the current EHV1 cases, and this is really looking at just the 90 days, November of 2018 to just the first part of February, actually 2019. And I'm not going to go through each of these. The information, which is not always complete because the complete information is not always provided to EDCC, the Equine Disease Communications Center. You can see the states that have been involved in this 90-day period: California, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Washington, Georgia, and then switching to the continuation of this, Indiana again, New York, Virginia, Mississippi. So I think all I'm going to mention on these two slides, just to summarize those, for the past 90 days, we have had a situation with 8 states involved, 10 different premises, 12 equine herpes myeloencephalopathy confirmed cases, 2 of the EHV1 confirmed cases, and 2 EHV4 confirmed cases. 5 of the 12 equine herpes myeloencephalopathy cases were euthanized or died in the last 90 days. So that is a very brief overview of some of the regulatory aspects and that data from 2017-18. I would be happy at the end of the hour, if there's any questions, to be asked those. This is my contact information and Dr. Flynn's contact information. If you have any additional questions, feel free to get in touch with us. And as always, I would remind you that I do facilitate the United States Equine National Conference Call the second Thursday of every month. And if anybody on this call is interested in joining us on that call, get in touch with me, and I'm happy to add you to the distribution list on that call. So with that, I will finish there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kent. That's very useful information. I want to mention that if you are on the webinar, all of the presentations from today are uploaded, and you should be able to just click download files to be able to review them later. As well, a recording of all our national calls and the webinar is usually posted to the Equestrian Canada website at the end of each month ahead of the next month's call. So all this information can be accessed later, and as a last resort, you can always email me at khouse@equestrian.ca. So our next speaker is Jackie from the National Farm Animal Care Council. Jackie, if you can just star 6 to unmute yourself. And did you want me to upload your presentation, or are you able to do so?
Sounds like, based on everyone else's experience, I'll let you upload my presentation and just have you advance the slides.
Sure.
So while that's happening, I'll just start. This is 10 minutes of a 10-minute excerpt of a presentation that is an hour long. So really appreciate the opportunity to give you a bit of a taste of what's going on. Oh, there's the presentation. It was quick. What's going on with an update to the Code of Practice for the care and handling of livestock and poultry related to transportation. So in short form, the Transportation Code of Practice. I'm not going to provide a whole lot of background information. The code, we have a code from 2011. I wanted to launch into, because I only have the 10 minutes, into where we're at today. And there is, yeah, perfect, thank you. We're in now phase 2 of the Transportation Code update. So phase 1 was where we really did a lot of preparatory work to help us figure out how were we going to even begin to update a code that engages and involves so many different types of livestock and poultry. So in phase 1, we produced 3 reports. The first one was the Scientific Committee report, and anyone who's familiar with our code process knows that that's a standard part of all code development and updates. Is we have a scientific committee that reviews the literature on key, the most top of mind usually, priority welfare issues for which there is a decent body of research. So that has been done already on the transportation side. Equine has a very small chapter in that entire report. A lot of it focused on cattle and pigs, a little bit on sheep, and of course poultry as well. But that report, you can see the link at the bottom. All 3 reports are available at that link. And the report on the environmental scan of regulatory and operational considerations, that was really, it's going to be an important, oh, go backward, I'm not done yet. Thank you. That is an important background piece for going forward for the Code Development Committee, because of course anyone who's transported any type of livestock understands that it's more than just the humane transportation aspect, that there are a whole lot of other regulatory requirements, and so this is kind of a compilation of all the other considerations that go into transporting livestock and poultry. And then finally, the report on findings, the scope and structure of the Code of Practice for the transportation of livestock and poultry. This is about mostly gathering information, gathering insights, doing a lot of stakeholder consultation around how do we tackle a code that is going to have 14 different types of critter covered, and how do we engage the literally hundreds of people that would need to even be on a code development committee for something like this, and keep it all manageable. So most of what I'm going to talk about going forward is going to be on that last bullet on that report, but all 3 reports are available at that link. So now you can advance to the next slide. So there are a number of key decisions that came out of that last report on the stakeholder consultation. This code is going to focus on road transport only, which is what the last code focused on as well. So we're not covering air, we're not covering by sea, we're not covering by rail, strictly by road transport, and also only on public highways. So not on farm, on farm transport, say between two different buildings, which is something that happens in some sectors. We are going to focus in on those species for which there is already an existing code of practice. So you can see equine, of course, is then going to be included on this code, and we have 14 other groups that will also be engaged as well. So next slide. Vehicle type. A lot of discussion around this in terms of, do we stick with commercial type vehicles? Bottom line, we're really focused on the humane transport of all types of livestock and poultry, and so the type of vehicle used is can contribute to how humane that transportation might be. And so while there may be some refinement of this by the Code Development Committee, in general, we are looking at any transportation by any vehicle, regardless of size or type, that is done on a public road or highway. Another point around intermediary transitional points, there was a really strong consensus on this one that places like auction markets and assembly yards, feed water rest stations, these are all part of the transportation continuum. Animals are there on a temporary basis, and therefore this needs to be part of the transportation code as well. So next slide. Some key decisions on code structure. We are going to be looking at a single code that captures all of these different critters and does it in a modular approach, but broken into several main modules that then break down into smaller modules. So we'll have three basic ways that this breaks out. We'll have livestock that walk onto conveyances, livestock that are carried onto conveyances, which would be typically in containers, and poultry. So I think you can guess where equine is going to be in that module. And then each module will also have a common element section, because we anticipate that there will be some things that, regardless of what you're transporting, there are going to be some common elements that are going to be common to everyone. But then, of course, we know that there are species-specific issues, and then, of course, relevant appendices and of course, references. So the next slide gives you a visual. Ooh, what happened there? Okay, that is not what it looks like on my presentation. Not at all. All right, so this requires a little bit of a sideways look, and I think once you get the presentation, it should show up properly. I'm surprised it's showing up like this. But anyways, at the top you see NFAC Transportation Code. So that's the overall code. Then we'll look at what are the kind of the common elements that, regardless of what kind of animal you're transporting, something that would be common to all. So that might relate to certain issues with vehicles in terms of their safety, that sort of thing. And then it would break into the three different modules. So these are working titles, but they are pretty descriptive. So we're looking at, like I said, the livestock walk-on, the livestock carry-on, and then poultry. So you can see that equine is, you can kind of see if you tilt your head sideways, that equine is on the livestock walk-on side. Amongst all those other walk-on type animals, we expect that there will be a common element section there. And then equine itself will have its own module, and then, of course, relevant appendices related to that, to each one of those species-specific modules. Oh, you've moved on to the next slide. I'm looking at my own slide presentation here so I can actually read it. Working groups are going to be tasked with much of the upfront work of the code. There will be one working group for each species, so you can see that equine working group. There are some that would be combined, like bison and deer we're thinking can be combined, mink and fox and rabbit. There will be one working group for each common element section, and one working group for each specialized section. We may add some more working groups as we go along. We'll have working groups coming out of our ears by the end of this. There are, I think, 16 just initially to start with. And so we're going to have code managers that are going to be assigned to each one of those working groups. Okay, you're jumping ahead of me here. So the
I'm changing them.
no, you can move forward now. Now I am ready. Sorry. All right, so the species-specific working group, you can see equine there and all the other working groups that will be engaged. Now we can move on to the next slide. And this is kind of a visual of how it will all lay out. We'll have the working groups are really going to be charged with most of the heavy lifting in terms of what's going to be in the code content for that module, that section. In terms of looking at like who needs to be on these working groups, this is a transportation code of practice, so we most certainly are going to be putting transporters front and center and doing everything we can to engage with transporters of every kind to be involved, livestock and poultry transporters of all kinds, to be involved in this code update. Each working group will have a producer representative, but just like we were looking at, if you're looking at a regular on-farm code, there's usually several producers and one transporter. We're kind of reversing this for the working groups because we do need the transporters to be front and center on this. And then the producers will of course need to be on each working group specific to whatever working group makes sense for them. Obviously equine producers on the equine working group. We are also seeing that each working group is probably going to have some animal welfare representation, and then CFIA/Ag Canada, CFIA in particular, given their regulatory responsibilities on transportation. The main reason why we're kind of showing that these four segments are who really needs to be on the working group is because they're kind of the groups that we're anticipating that we don't want this making its way to the code development committee and then finding out we don't have consensus. So we want to achieve consensus as much as possible at the working group level before things move their way through to the code development committee. Now, having said that, we are also asking groups like veterinarians, like the research community, like processors, to tell us which working groups they feel they need to be a part of. Resources are limited, and if we're asking, for example, the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association to identify veterinarians for every single working group, that's a huge ask. However, some of the conversations we've already had have indicated that the veterinary community really does see itself as needing to be on pretty much all of the working groups. So we'll manage this as we can. We are aiming to have the working groups to be as small and tight as possible. We were looking originally at around 5 to 7 people per working group with a cap of 10. We'll see how that works for, every working group will kind of look a little bit different depending upon need, and we are really looking to, national groups to tell us where do they best fit, where do they need to be engaged, where do they need to be involved. And I'll just mention at this point that I said this was an excerpt of an hour-long presentation. We are hosting 11 teleconferences where we've broken all the different groups that need to be engaged on this code into different like groupings, and are hosting a number of teleconferences over the last couple of weeks. I know, Christy, you're signed up for one of the teleconferences coming up. and on the livestock group side. So national representatives are going to be listening to an hour-long presentation. It's about an hour and a half in total. We're leaving time to have some conversation and engage with all the different groups that need to be involved to tell us where they see themselves sitting, and also to just kind of present all of this information and make sure that everyone is kind of able to ramp up as they need to ramp up to get prepared for the ask on this code. Can we stay on that previous slide for just a second? One ahead again. There we go. The Editing and Review Committee, just really quickly, that's just a group that is going to be made up of the code director and code managers. They're not changing any content, but because they're all going to be involved with all the different working groups, we expect that what we want to put forward to the Code Development Committee is going to be a draft that where the the syntax and the terminology and there's some consistency between the wording that's being used, so that that we're not having to deal with that at the working group level. So some of that editing work, without changing any of the intent or the actual content, would happen at that Editing Review Committee before it would go on to what the Code Development Committee, which looks more like our traditional code development committees, where there's a full gamut of multi-stakeholder diverse groups engaged. And you can move on to the next slide now, which is my pretty much my last slide. So we are looking at, one of the things that we're asking each national group to do is potentially each national group could have a representative on the Code Development Committee and then also on various working groups. What we're asking to ensure that, I think everyone is going to really have to work together on the communication side. This may not be as relevant for Equine Canada, because you may have just the one working group that you need to be on, and then it may be your rep there is the rep on the Code Development Committee, but that won't necessarily be the situation for every national group, and especially for groups like veterinarians, where there will be multiple participants on the working groups, and we can only have one or two maybe reps on the Code Development Committee. The ask is that each national group prioritize their representation, but also they're going to need to, the Code Development Committee members are going to need to coordinate with those working group participants to ensure that there's no surprises when things come up to the Code Development Committee level. The heavy lifting should be done at the working group, the consensus achieved there, so that when things are coming up to the Code Development Committee level, the Code Development Committee members are already well aware of what's happened at the working group level. And so that may require national groups to create some kind of model for internal consultations and communications. It could be different for each group, or it could link into an existing internal structure. If there's an existing animal welfare committee that could coordinate all of the different working group members that feed into the Code Development Committee rep, that would be hugely beneficial. Again, I'm not sure how much that will impact a group like Equine Canada, where you have a very focused and your own working group. We're looking at this, potentially with like the poultry sector. Can they combine their resources so that they have one producer rep at the Code Development Committee level? And of course, then there's going to be multiple people involved at the working group level. So we're having those conversations with industry, with veterinarians, with the animal welfare groups, with the researchers, right across the board, and aiming to push forward as quickly as we can and get these working groups organized. But the first step is to go through these 11 teleconferences that we're hosting for various national groups. The one for livestock walk-on is there's one on February the 7th, so that's tomorrow, and then another on February the 12th. And so if anyone on this call really feels that they need to be a part of that, let me know, and I can put you in touch with the code director, and we can get you onto that, onto one of those calls. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. So we do have one more speaker. Julia was a late addition, but at this time I would like to take any questions so that our speakers that have come on, I know we're already over time, and I want to make sure that we can give you an opportunity to sign off on time. So if you do have a question and you're logged in on just the webinar, you can click the raise your hand function at the top of the screen, and then I can unmute your microphone, or if you're on the phone, it's *6 to unmute. Okay, and hearing no questions, I will just let Julia Oberon from University of Guelph. Yeah.
Hi. Can I have a question for Nat White, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Nat. Start to unmute yourself.
How do you determine how much information regarding location you provide?
We do that by county in the states that report. If we have a city that's indicated or a town, we can report that. We have to be very careful not to report private facilities because of potential liability both ways. And so, and we're working on the idea that we would have a map that would point out where the county is in the state, because not everybody knows that. So we'll work on that, but right now it's by county, and that's reported by the state animal health official or the attending veterinarian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other questions before we just give Julia the floor? Julia, I will have you come on the March call with a bit more time, but if you want to sort of just give us a heads up into what you'll be talking about in March, we can make sure you have a lot of time on the agenda.
Perfect. I just have a very brief update today. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, if you want to go ahead.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Allebrand. I'm a student at the University of Guelph, and I'm really excited to inform you about the 15th Annual International Society for Equitation Science Conference that will take place from August 19th to August 21st, 2019 at the University of Guelph. The International Society for Equitation Science is a not-for-profit organization aiming to facilitate research into horse training. It operates with the goal of enhancing horse welfare and improving the horse-rider relationship. This organization runs international conferences that serve as platforms for communication and discussion of the latest research findings and their applications in practice. In the fall of 2019, we're really excited to receive the opportunity to host the 15th annual conference at the University of Guelph in Guelph, Ontario. And the theme this year will be Bringing Science to the Stable. The conference will focus on mankind's history with horses, what we've learned about horse-human interactions, and how we can continue to improve our relationships with these amazing animals. In line with the ISCS mission, this conference will promote and encourage the application of objective research and advanced practice to improve the welfare of horses in their associations with humans. Registration for attendance is now available through the horseportal.ca. The early bird rate is available until June 1st, so we strongly encourage you to register as soon as you can. And if you would like to seize this opportunity to sponsor and partner with us for this conference to be a fundamental element of this event, please connect with us via email at ifcs2019@uoguelph.ca. And we will have both exhibitor and sponsorship opportunities available, so make sure you inquire. By aligning your company with our conference, you become an active contributor to a collaborative learning environment and discussions about the latest research and innovations in the equine industry over 3 consecutive days. There's an expected attendance of 200 to 300 delegates from around the globe, and this event will provide an excellent opportunity for you to reach world-class researchers, undergraduate and graduate students, veterinarians, and equine practitioners. If you're an individual involved with equine research and you wish to submit a scientific abstract, please also visit the horseportal.ca, selecting the conference tab.
and there you will find the abstract submission instructions, and the deadline to submit an abstract is April 1st, 2019. And for any further information, please either visit thehorseportal.ca, acquitationscience.com, or email ISC